On the 25th of May 2020, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, America, the tragic murder of George Floyd by a police officer was captured for the whole world to see. Police officer Derek Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes while he was face down and being restrained by two other officers. George was fatally asphyxiated, his last words being, "I can't breathe." And his crime? A shop worker suspected that he had used a fake $20 bill when paying for his goods in the shop. George Floyd's death sparked a series of international protests about police brutality against black people. But 33 years earlier, and just over 4,000 miles away, in the UK, England, this exact incident had already happened before. This is the tragic story of 24-year-old Clinton McCurbin. On Friday, the 20th of February, 1987, at approximately 11:45 a.m., 24-year-old Clinton McCurbin, who had shopped for a £45 jacket in the next clothing store in the Manda shopping centre in Wolverhampton town centre in the West Midlands, went to the tills to pay for the jacket. Clinton had produced a Barclays card to pay for his jacket, but the sales assistant became suspicious that the card was stolen and called the police. Two police officers arrived, PC Michael Hobday and PC Neil Thomas, and when the police officers arrived and tried to ask him to come with them, he refused. They tried to apprehend Clinton, so then he tried to leave the clothing store, and a struggle ensued between the two police officers and Clinton, in which all three fell to the floor. According to the shop supervisor on the men's floor, and Mr. Darren Solly, who witnessed the whole incident, he said, Clinton dodged the police and ran for the exit. Police blocked the door and a struggle ensued, resulting in all three falling to the floor. He said Clinton was very erratic in his movements and doing all he could to wriggle out of the way. Because the struggle between Clinton and the two police officers was near the entrance, a lot of passerbys was able to see what was going on through the glass doors of the shop entrance. Another shop worker who witnessed the incident, sales assistant Simon Oakes, said, Clinton went absolutely mad when two officers tried to arrest him. He threw both officers against the doors of the store with considerable force. He was very strong and was lashing out at them with his arms and legs. They all fell to the floor, but Clinton was still lashing out. At the sight of the commotion, a crowd of onlookers outside began to look into the shop to see what was going on, with several eyewitnesses that were outside looking in saying that Clinton was not violent at all. He was only trying to get away. Eyewitness Raymond Coulter said, I saw a policeman run up and grab him round the neck. The man was swinging himself round trying to get away. Then he fell against the window. Next thing, they were kneeling on him. The force they used was far too excessive. Another eyewitness, a black woman in the shop, who burst out crying, said, he never swung a punch against them. He did not get a chance. One of the shoppers, a member of the public, a Mr. Gary Belcher, saw the commotion and decided to be a have-a-go hero by helping the two police officers to hold down Clinton by holding down Clinton's legs as he was on the floor. PC Neil Thomas held Clinton's hands behind his back, whilst PC Michael Hobday had Clinton in a neck hold. Seeing what was going on, a black man and a black woman came into the store and started shouting at the police to let go his neck. In a statement, the supervisor of the menswear section, Darren Solly, said Clinton was lying face down on the floor with one officer gripping him around his neck in an arm lock while the other one grabbed his legs. Whilst the sales assistant, Simon Oakes, said, I realised that Clinton was having trouble breathing because of the officer's arm around his neck, but the officer did not realise as he was distracted by shoppers telling him to take his hand off Clinton's neck. A crowd of onlookers began to gather outside the store, looking in through the doorway, and began to shout out at the police, saying, Stop it, you're killing him, and demanded that the officer let go of Clinton's neck. The Have a Go hero, member of the public, who helped to hold down Clinton's legs, stated that he heard the police officer in what he describes as an act of bravado in response to the onlookers' taunts when they were telling him to stop holding Clinton's neck. He said the officer said, Hold his neck, I'll break his bloody neck. Clinton's body went limp and he stopped moving, but no attempts were made to give him first aid because the policemen thought he was faking being unconscious. And it was said by the sales assistant Simon Oakes that the police officer was totally distracted by a black man who was speaking in heated terms to him. When they realised there was still no movement from Clinton McCurbin, his lifeless body was moved by the police to a back room in the clothing store. There, they attempted to resuscitate him by giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for 20 minutes. But it was too late. 24-year-old Clinton McCurbin was pronounced dead on the scene. The whole ordeal had lasted just 12 minutes.
The next minute, these two policemen, they're getting down on the ground, face downwards. They're getting face downwards, and one holds him by his neck like this, and the other puts his arms behind his back and hold him down like that. The next minute, a customer comes and helps a policeman. One holds his legs at the back to stop his legs moving around. And I noticed the policeman at the front row. He was using a lot of force on his neck. Kept on using a lot of force.
Did he say anything to the fella?
He says well, I think I heard him say, right, are you all right, a couple of times to him, right? He was asking the West Indian if he was all right, but every time he asked him, he pulled his neck up even further, right? So it looked like Clinton was just struggling because he was in pain.
I was walking past the shop, and there's this coloured man on the floor. There's this one man wrapped around his legs, one sitting on his back, and this big copper, like, at his neck, right back, and he's just, like, yanking it.
And there was a woman, another coloured woman there, and she was really upset. She was going, loose his neck, you're going to kill him. And they just says, well, if you want to file a complaint, go down the police station.
I was coming from the civic centre, Wolverhampton's town council housing place, and I was attracted to the next shop by like a thump of somebody's back against the door, like a scuffle going on inside the shop. I went over and stood right in the exit of the shop, and I seen this young Jamaican kid, and the two police officers had him firmly against the two inner doors of the shop. The bigger officer, who had McCurbin round the neck, had like kneed him in the chest. To me, I could see that the fellow was in pain, like, because he'd leaned forward, and at the same time was instantaneous blows. Well, I say 8 or 9 blows, which knocked him to the front glass of the window, and the glass window smashed. Said the same to several newspapers, to the Caribbean Times and to the Express and Star.
Did you see Clinton McCurbin at any point strike any of the officers?
No, the kid was. He didn't. He didn't have any intentions of fighting or anything like that. Because if he had any intentions of fighting, I mean, I was standing right where it happened, and if he had any intentions of fighting, he wouldn't have been dead now.
By now, a crowd had gathered at the scene outside the next clothing store after rumours went round that a black man had been killed by police, and the media descended on the scene. Clinton's death triggered a near riot, and masked gangs of youth cried for revenge. At the scene of the incident, Chief Constable of the West Midlands released a statement saying that Clinton McCurbin had died from a heart attack caused by drug abuse whilst being arrested. But nobody in the black community was buying that, especially a young, fit and healthy 24-year-old man just suddenly dying of a heart attack. The next statement that police told onlookers was that Clinton was carrying a hammer in a white carrier bag, probably to try and justify their level of violence towards Clinton. But the police would later deny making this statement, and no hammer was ever found on Clinton's person, nor was the so-called hammer that the police had supposedly found on Clinton ever produced. By 2 p.m, the crowd that had gathered had become so big that the 2 police officers that had restrained Clinton were ushered out of the back of the next clothing store to avoid anything happening to them due to the wrath of the people outside. It took over 2 hours for an ambulance to eventually come to collect Clinton's body, and by then the wrath of the black community had been unleashed and the riot squad had been called in. Allegedly, within hours of Clinton McCurbin's death, posters and leaflets were circulated bearing the name the Black Action Group, which called the police murderers and called on the black community to revolt. Groups of youths went on rampages through Wolverhampton city centre, smashing up shop windows, and there were scenes of violence. Demonstrators took to the streets, shops were looted, missiles were thrown, police fell injured. Officers in riot gear toured the streets in armoured vehicles. A 35-year-old man, Vincent Lloyd Wood, wrestled a youth away from an arresting officer and then swung a punch at the officer. He was arrested and charged with using threatening words and behaviours. He would eventually go to court and be given a 2-year conditional discharge. 19-year-old Kenneth Anthony Graham violently pushed an officer, causing the officer to stagger, and swore at police, which the police say led to others in the crowd to get involved. Kenneth of Whit Marines was charged with assaulting Officer Michael Fiello and using threatening behaviour. 18-year-old Michael Hutchins, described by police as an excited youth, punched Police Inspector Kenneth McKee, then knocked Sikh police officer PC Narjit Singh to the ground and then tried to pull his turban off. Michael was charged with assault, causing actual bodily harm. Plainclothes police officers who were amongst the crowd were also injured whilst trying to make arrests. A John James Reed broke into Kerner's Jewellers in Worcester Street and looted £13,000 worth of goods. He also broke into and stole property from a parked car and then attempted to break into another car. When plainclothes police tried to arrest him, he attacked them with a hammer. The officers suffered injuries and were unable to work for several weeks. John James Reed would eventually be arrested and jailed for 3.5 years. Paul Gerard Smith, aged 22, who took part in a town's disturbance, was given a 6-month suspended sentence, charged with using threatening words. 17-year-old Dylan Rodney Clark, 17-year-old Christopher Roy Moody, 27-year-old Ray Anthony Williams, and an unnamed 33-year-old man were all arrested and charged with using threatening words and behaviours. Stores and restaurants closed and shopkeepers locked their doors, with many boarding up their windows. More police in riot gear were called in. 4 policemen were hurt and 13 people were arrested for public order offences. Calls were made to the local newspaper office, the Express and Star, warning that policemen would be maimed or killed in revenge for the death of Clinton McCurbin. Allegedly, a group calling themselves the Liberation Front planted bombs in the Wolverhampton Civic Centre. The bombs were detonated by bomb safety experts, and there were bomb scares in not just Wolverhampton but also Walsall Town Centre, and shoppers had to be evacuated when a device was found hidden under a vehicle. The violent disorder went on for 2 nights after Clinton McCurbin's death, but 5 months after Clinton's death, in July 1987, a car bomb was planted at Birmingham Road Police Station in Blakenhall, Wolverhampton. Another bomb was planted on a housing estate in Penderford, Wolverhampton, and the police were lured to the scene with false reports of an emergency by phone. Luckily, no one was hurt. In the days following Clinton's death, staff that worked at the next clothing store where Clinton McCurbin was killed alleged that they had received death threats after the people found out that it was one of the workers there that had called the police, and a rumour mistakenly went round that the member of the public who had helped the police to hold down Clinton McCurbin was a member of staff at the store. He wasn't a member of staff, he was just simply a member of the public who chose to involve himself when he saw the police trying to arrest Clinton, and he held down Clinton McCurbin's legs so that he couldn't move. The staff that were on duty at the time of the incident, 10 in total, were all moved to different branches of Next, prompted by management for fear of their safety, and volunteers were brought in instead, and a private security firm was also hired to keep guard during trading hours. The police appealed for witnesses, especially the 2 black women and the black man that was in the store shouting at the police to get off Clinton's neck and had witnessed the whole thing. And statements were taken from more than 100 witnesses. Clinton's brother, Michael McCurbin, was taken to Wensfield Police Station in Wolverhampton to be told of his brother's death. And when questioned, he was asked if his brother Clinton was on drugs or if he'd had lessons in kung fu and boxing, most likely to justify the reports they had released to the media, saying that Clinton had died from a drug-induced heart attack while struggling with officers, and due to this, his heart gave out, also to imply that the officers had to struggle with him because he had this superhuman strength and was resisting arrest. Clinton's brother Michael called for a public inquiry into his brother's death and feared that there would be a cover-up. The Police Complaints Authority was responsible for investigating complaints against the police and was first set up in 1984. Its investigating officers were serving policemen who had been drafted in by the Police Complaints Authority from other police forces, a system which bred suspicion. The police investigating the police. The Police Complaints Authority was bound by law to only publish brief details of inquiries. They did not have to disclose anything more than a summary, and this led to calls from the public to end investigations of the police by the police. And it was this agency, the Police Complaints Authority, that would be investigating Clinton McCurbin's death at the hands of the police. And Mr. Roland Moyle, Deputy Chairman of the Police Complaints Authority, said that he was willing to meet eyewitnesses and representatives of the community before talking formally to the investigations team, which was led by Chief Superintendent David Cole, head of West Mercia CID. The West Indian Standing Conference called on the then Home Secretary, Mr. Douglas Hurd, to set up an independent public inquiry into the circumstances of the death of Clinton McCurbin, and they wrote a letter to the Home Secretary which read, "There is something extraordinary, questionable and worrying in the way police methods involve the use of excessive force in the restraining and apprehending of suspects, the consequences of which invariably result in death." Michael Hobday and Neil Thomas, the 2 police officers that had restrained Clinton, were said to be deeply shaken and distressed by the incident and were now on paid sick leave. A post-mortem was carried out on Clinton McCurbin's body by home pathologist Dr. Kenneth Scott, who concluded that Clinton McCurbin did not die from a heart attack. There was nothing wrong with his heart, nor were any drugs or alcohol found in his system. He said that Clinton McCurbin had died from asphyxia consistent with restraint during police attempts to arrest. Asphyxia is another word for strangulation. He had died from total obstruction of his windpipe. The McCurbin family hired their own pathologist to also give a cause of death for Clinton McCurbin. The pathologist, a Dr. Ian West, said that it wasn't a violent strangulation and the findings were consistent with Clinton's head being held back and police pressing on his arteries, and that compression of the airways was the most important factor in Clinton's death, saying that only 11 pounds of pressure was needed to render a person unconscious. Every eyewitness at the scene of the incident said that they saw PC Michael Hobday with his arms around Clinton's neck and that he was also pulling Clinton's head back as he had his arms around his neck. Chief Constable Jeffrey Deere made a public statement refusing to apologise for giving out incorrect information when Clinton died by saying it was because of drugs. He said that the information he was given at the time was by a medical person well qualified to give him that opinion, so that's why he gave out that statement. The Chief Constable refused to apologise, saying he's got nothing to apologise for because he said that the rumour mill was saying that Clinton died from a broken neck, from being stabbed, or that he had got beaten up. He then went on to say, West Midlands police have nothing to apologise for in giving out initial cause of death, as it's part of our open policy. He then praised the police officers for the way they dealt with the trouble following Clinton's death, saying that their response showed great credit, and also said that there will be no change in police training and they will not be trained in neck holds.
Statement.
But the rumours on the street were, and they were put out maliciously, he died through being beaten to death, stabbed to death, had his neck broken. And they were very, very significant. And we, having taken the very best medical advice, which was given to us in the very best of knowledge, was that it was almost certain he died of cardiac arrest, probably enhanced by drugs. And bearing in mind, this is what witnesses were saying to a doctor. And against the background of rumour and a very volatile situation in Wolverhampton, it seemed, and I'm convinced, I plead my own case, of course, I'll have to aim off because I'm obviously prejudiced in this, I'm convinced it was the right decision. It is a pity, in a sense, that the post-mortem contradicted it. And it's a pity that the information wasn't always translated with the caveat that this must be subject to a post-mortem, but it appears that in medical advice. But it was a frank statement of the position as it appeared.
The police were accused of trying to smear Clinton McCurbin's name by putting it out to the public that his death was caused by drug abuse. Clinton's mother, 40-year-old Esther McCurbin, who lived in New York, flew back to England when she was told what had happened to her son. And she asked publicly, "Why did my son have to die?" Wolverhampton Council had offered to pay the McCurbin family's travel and legal expenses, which drew massive outcry from some of the public. Labour Party councillor Peter Bilson, the council's deputy lead, called for a full inquiry into Clinton McCurbin's death, blaming deep-seated racism for furious protests because he'd offered Clinton's family a goodwill gesture of £2,000, saying that he was unapologetic about what he did. Because of this, he received both public abuse and faced the wrath of his own party members, as well as furious protests from the Tories and Liberal Democrats. Tory councillor Mrs. Paddy Bradley accused him of playing into the hands of extremists and said that by offering the family £2,000 and offering to pay all their travel and legal costs, then Labour would be held to ransom in the future by those wishing to smash windows and loot. In response to this, the Tories were accused of trying to whip up racist propaganda, with Labour councillor Peter Bilson, who had offered the McCurbin family the money, saying, "I am not sure whether I have been surprised by the response. I have been saddened by the underlying racism, which we hope to continually work towards eliminating. It seems that goal is way off. If Clinton had been white, the outburst would not have followed. On Saturday the 7th of March, 1987, 2 weeks after Clinton McCurbin's death, at around 12:30 p.m, demonstrators turned up in the cold icy weather to march through Wolverhampton town centre to protest the death of Clinton McCurbin, despite being warned not to by the media, who were predicting violence, a riot and bloodshed. It was predicted that hundreds of thousands would turn up, but most likely due to the snow, it was just over 3,000 people that turned up. Protesters arrived by coach from all over Britain and marched chanting "Murderers, Wolves Police, Murderers and Racists." The McCurbin family were at the head of the march. There were allegedly 1 or 2 minor scuffles between police and masked protesters, and a policeman was hit in the face with a piece of metal drain pipe and was taken away bleeding heavily. Behind the protesters were several heavily armed police vans, and the march continued onto Dunster Road police station, where the marchers halted whilst booing and chanting, "Burn the station! Burn the station!" The station entrance was guarded by police mounted on horseback and dog handlers. Opposite the police station was the Tabernacle Baptist Church, where members of the church stood on the church steps and sang hymns. The Reverend of the church, Peter Gordon Roberts, said, "We are very concerned. We are interested in justice and the peace of the town." Throughout the march, supporters passed around collection tins to help raise money for the McCurbin family. The procession went to the next store where Clinton was killed, and when Clinton's mother Esther tried to enter the store to lay flowers down where her son had died, she was prevented from doing so by security, who then closed the door on her. So Esther threw the flowers down in the shop doorway instead, and that's where they stayed. On Wednesday the 15th of April, 1987, nearly 2 months after his untimely death, was Clinton McCurbin's funeral. There were over 100 mourners, and the procession started at his brother Michael McCurbin's home, Campion House, on Wensfield Road in Heathtown, Wolverhampton. The mourners walked half a mile down the road to the Holy Trinity Parish Church in Heathtown, alongside the coffin that was wheeled on a trolley. There was a wreath with the initials CM carried by the family, and at the church there were speakers outside. The sermon was led by Pastor Bishop Theophilus McCalla, and the police kept a low profile during the procession.
Therefore, as we come together, we are mourning this afternoon. We are sad, we are nervous, and some is bitter, and we have got the press here and everyone, but I'm glad that sooner or later the pressmen will be standing before God, the policemen will be standing before God. Jesus said, "Behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to pay every man according as his work shall be."
We have gathered here today to mourn a loved one and to honour a departed friend, Clinton Ludlow McCurbin.
24-year-old Clinton McCurbin was affectionately known as Cheyenne by his family, and he was a welder by trade. He lived off Hovey Court, Graiseley Lane, in Wensfield in Wolverhampton.
We now commit his mortal body to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
In August 1987, 6 months after Clinton McCurbin's death, the Director of Public Prosecutions said that the 2 officers that were involved in Clinton McCurbin's death, PC Michael Hobday and PC Neil Thomas, should face no criminal proceedings, and they were cleared of any disciplinary action by West Midlands police, which left the black community angry, saying that the police had a license to kill. And 6 months after that, on Monday the 1st of February 1988, the inquest into the death of Clinton McCurbin began. But before the jurors could be sworn in, the McCurbin family lawyer, Mr. Paul Boateng, also a Labour MP for Brent South, refused to accept an all-white jury of 11 jurors, saying, "It's vital to justice that Afro-Caribbeans should be on the jury. We have a mother whose son came to die at the hands of white policemen. She is now being asked to put her confidence into the hands of people who are all white. In this case, which has caused so much public concern, justice must not only be done, but seen to be done." Paul Boateng said that he'd written to the Wolverhampton coroner, Keith Swain, in April 1987, suggesting a racially balanced jury for the case, as race was an element in the inquest. A racially balanced jury was essential. But an application to have black people on the jury was rejected by the coroner, Keith Swain, who said, "The jury has been summoned, not by me, but by my officer in accordance with the law. It will be completely wrong for me to interfere with the jury that has been summoned." The coroner's officer, Sergeant Frank Corcoran, said that the jurors had been selected at random from a list of voters. The McCurbin solicitor, Paul Boateng, accused the coroner of ignoring the sensitive nature of the proceedings and branded his decision outrageous. He said that he would be considering going to the High Court for a review of the coroner's decision. Clinton McCurbin's mother, Esther McCurbin, said, "We will never get justice from an all-white jury." Because of solicitor Paul Boateng's refusal to accept an all-white jury, the inquest was adjourned. The second inquest into Clinton McCurbin's death began 8 months later, on Monday the 24th of October 1988, at Wolverhampton Coroner's Court, presided over by Coroner Keith Swain, and it lasted for a week, where everyone entering the court was searched and guards were placed at the courtroom doors. This time around, it was a jury of 10, 7 white jurors, 1 black juror, and 2 Asian jurors. At the inquest, it was told to the jury that police were now to be taught restraining techniques following the death of Clinton McCurbin, and that the 2 police officers involved in his death had only received training in the remote past. Detective Chief Superintendent David Cole told the inquest that the 2 officers had received training that had advised them against the use of neck holds, but that the training at that time was very limited. Detective Chief Superintendent David Cole then proceeded to read out Clinton McCurbin's past criminal record, where in March 1986, just under 1 year before his death, Clinton had been convicted for assault, causing actual bodily harm, when he had assaulted his former boss for sacking him. Clinton was fined £100 and ordered to pay compensation of £120 by Walsall magistrates. The same month, Clinton was fined £10 for failing to surrender to bail. Michael Hobday, the policeman who had Clinton McCurbin in a neck hold, also spoke at the inquest 3 days into the inquest on Thursday the 27th of October 1988, where he said, "I dared not release my grip on Clinton for fear he might escape. He was twisting and turning, struggling violently, obviously trying to get away. I got the chance to put my arm around his head. It wasn't a desire to do that. That was how it felt. A lot of people were gathering around. I didn't realize the hold because the man had struggled so violently. He seemed to calm down and stopped struggling. I knew the other officer had called for help, and I thought it best to continue holding onto the man until help arrived. I feared that if I tried to put handcuffs on him, he might try to struggle and fight to escape. I had no reason to suspect he was ill and unable to breathe." Darren Solly, the supervisor at the next clothing store where Clinton McCurbin was killed, gave his account of what happened on that fateful day, ending by saying, "In my opinion, they were using no more than reasonable force to hold Clinton McCurbin." And Mr. Sukhvinder Singh Pawar spoke at the inquest saying that Clinton McCurbin was face down with his head pulled back, practically strangled by the officer using an arm lock. The pathologist that the McCurbin family had sought to carry out a second post-mortem, Dr. Ian West, told the inquest that PC Michael Hobday said that he had his arm around Clinton's head, so in his professional opinion, his arm must have slipped down around Clinton's neck. On the final day of the inquest, Tuesday the 1st of November 1988, before the verdict was announced, the coroner, Keith Swain, told the jury that an unlawful killing verdict would mean manslaughter arising from criminal negligence or lack of care. In the coroner's summing up of the case, he told the jurors that the death of Mr. McCurbin could have been a tragic accident, as evidenced by the pathologist suggesting it was a slipped hold during the struggle that led to the death, and that in his view it would be unsafe, wrong even, to find the arresting officers misconducted themselves in difficult circumstances in whatever way. The coroner then told the jury that there were 3 options open to them: misadventure, unlawful killing, or open verdict, and that he would accept a majority decision of 8-2, meaning that if 2 people didn't agree with the majority verdict, then they will go with the majority. The coroner also said that a verdict of misadventure would be appropriate when he was summing up the case. The jury of 10 took 3.5 hours to reach a unanimous verdict of death by misadventure. When the verdict was announced to the packed courtroom, there were groans of anger from spectators in the public gallery, whilst Clinton McCurbin's mother sat with her head bowed in her hands. They had been hoping for a verdict of unlawful killing. The McCurbin family fought to get the verdict of misadventure at the inquiry overturned at the Court of Appeal, and Clinton's brother Desmond applied to the High Court for a judicial review and for a fresh inquest to be heard. But on Monday the 12th of March 1990, the appeal was rejected, the application was dismissed, and the original verdict was upheld. Upon hearing that the appeal had been rejected, 20 demonstrators protested outside the next clothing store the next day. On the first anniversary of Clinton McCurbin's death, on the 20th of February 1988, a group of 25 people attended a wreath-laying ceremony outside of the next clothing store where Clinton McCurbin died. The ceremony had been arranged by a Black community action group. There, mourners linked arms and formed a semicircle around the entrance of the store, observing a minute's silence in Clinton McCurbin's memory. Till this day, 38 years after his death, nobody has been held accountable for the death of Clinton McCurbin.